Have you ever dropped your motorcycle? Well, how about you get at the end of a ride and your hands and shoulders just feel wore out, like it requires a whole lot of upper body strength to control your motorcycle? Well, this week on MCrider, we'll discuss those problems and other common mistakes that riders make when we look at the 5 things you should never, and I mean never, ever, do on your motorcycle. So let's start with what seems like the simplest thing you could possibly do on a motorcycle, but many people are doing it incorrectly, and it starts right here with your hands. So many riders grip the handlebars too tightly. New riders especially struggle with this. They maintain a death grip on the motorcycle, the grips in particular when they're learning to ride, because they think that's where they're supposed to be holding on at. Many riders will develop that as a habit and carry that with them as they progress as a rider out on the street. And many experienced riders, even if they've broken that habit in the past, they'll struggle with it again when they begin pushing their skills either out on a track or doing slow speed control skills on a motorcycle. In fact, when I get out on the track or I'm doing tighter patterns at slow speeds, it's one of those self-talk points that I constantly remind myself of. Saying things like stay loose or loosen your grip or stay fluid, I remind myself to keep that light grip on the grips of the handlebars. As riders, anytime we push ourselves, it's natural to tense up, and it makes the control of the motorcycle more difficult. But the main result of that too tight of a grip is fatigue in the rider, and that begins affecting our riding. So if your hands are fatigued at the end of a ride or at the end of a control skills practice session, remember, loosen up. So think about holding a raw egg in your hand. You wouldn't put a death grip on that raw egg. It should be the same type of grip when we go to the handlebars. You want a nice firm grip. You don't want it coming out of your hands, but you're not squeezing on it where you might break that egg. You need to keep that in mind when your hands go to the hand grips. Nice loose grip that's fluid and allows you motion and allows the motorcycle to move and correct itself. If you feel like you don't have a good enough grip on the motorcycle, our knees should be the primary means of holding on to the motorcycle. If we hold on with our knees, so tighten our knees up on the tank of the motorcycle, allows us to keep our upper body loose and that front tire to do its thing and help stabilize the motorcycle. So if you're having problems in this area with your hands, then you're likely having issues related to a second area. And it's the second thing that we should never do on a motorcycle. That's this. So if a rider is tight here, they're also likely to be tight here because our elbows are going to follow the tension of our hands and our whole upper body gets tense. So what's your first instinct when the front tire hits those grooves that are sometimes cut in the pavement, you know, the ones that are going along your path of travel? Have you ever experienced that? Sometimes there are cut grooves in the road prior to resurfacing the road. You'll see it a lot then. Sometimes they're just worn places or cracks in the road. But if they're going along your path of travel, they have an effect on the motorcycle. It causes that front tire to move and to wiggle a little bit and to drift a little bit in our lane. So our natural response to that or similar feedback from the motorcycle is to tighten up. We think that handlebar shouldn't be doing that, and we tighten up or we clamp down on it to try to control that unruly behavior. But in doing so, we not only fatigue ourselves, but we're fighting against the design of the motorcycle to maintain balance and traction and to keep the motorcycle on path. When a motorcycle passes over gravel or groove surfaces out on the road, it's normal for that front tire to move and to seek and regain traction. It's what it's supposed to be doing. That feedback comes up through the handlebars, and the more we fight against that movement, the more negative feedback we put into the equation, and the more difficult time the motorcycle has at maintaining that desired path of travel. So that self-talk about loosen up starts with the hands, translates up to the elbows and the shoulders, keeping your upper body loose on the motorcycle, and that starts with your hands and your elbows. Another common mistake that riders make is with their foot position. Many riders can start out with this as a bad habit, but it takes a lot of miles sometimes and a fair amount of training before it starts to become an issue. If you see a rider going down the road and their toes are sticking out to the side, you're seeing a rider who's got a bad habit. But why is it a problem that primarily affects riders as they gain more skill? or the problem surfaces or resurfaces when they gain more skills. The problem this creates in riding with our toes out is hitting your toes or your boots on the pavement as you lean over in a turn. Many new riders ride with their feet out and they never lean far enough to realize the problem because their toes aren't hitting the ground. But then they get a nice surprise when they get out on the track or they begin to get more aggressive in their slow speed control skills because the toes are the first thing that may hit the ground if you're sticking your feet out like that. If you ride with your toes angled out, it's likely to be that first point of contact with the road when you lean over moderately in a curve or a tight U-turn. As you get more skilled, the impact of your toes hitting the pavement becomes an even bigger issue, even to the point of possibly ripping your feet off the pegs, nearly breaking your big toes is what it felt like, wrenching your ankles and putting a nice big scuff mark on the freshly painted saddlebags of your 1999 Honda Valkyrie as your foot flies off the back of the peg and hits the saddlebags. Not that I would know this from experience, but that lesson to this day reminds me to check my foot position as I approach a curve or a tight turn with a more than moderate lean angle. I always have that thing pop up in my mind, make sure your toes are in. I learned that lesson once, and I haven't forgotten it. But if you start riding early with the balls of your feet on the pegs and in towards the motorcycle, or if you got a motorcycle with floorboards, keep your feet all the way up on the floorboards, not hanging off the sides. If you have bad knees like I do, it's not always comfortable to keep your feet tucked in, and at least you want to make sure that they are in and in good position before you do any aggressive turns or maneuvers on the motorcycle. Your foot position can also be affected by the motorcycle that you ride. That wide engine design of the Honda Goldwing leaves limited space to move your feet forward or backward, and it doesn't offer you a whole lot of position for foot placement. And some other bikes are like that as well, and riders will stick their toes out in order to get a little more comfort. But it's a bad habit to develop, riding with your toes pointed out. And in the least, you want to make sure that you check yourself and keep those toes in and out of harm's way when the lean angle gets a little more steeper. So far, we've covered body position on the motorcycle. We talked about our hands, our elbows, and our feet. The fourth and fifth thing that you should never do on a motorcycle is more of a technique issue rather than a body issue. The first one of these is the quickest way I know of to drop a motorcycle. That's using the front brake at slow speeds, especially with the handlebars turned. So have you ever seen someone drop a motorcycle in front of a huge crowd on a bike night? Or maybe that someone was you. Or maybe you're out on a group ride and someone drops their motorcycle at the gas station or when you stop for lunch. The odds are they were traveling at slow speeds, under 5 to 10 miles per hour. They had the handlebars turned even slightly, didn't take a whole lot of turn, and they grabbed the front brake or got too aggressive with the front brake. If you're on a heavy motorcycle and you do this, you just dropped your motorcycle. So Sturgis is getting ready to kick off, and I guarantee many, many riders will drop their motorcycle at the rally because of this simple mistake. So repeat this with me. Slow speeds equal rear brake only. Slow speeds equal rear brake only. Add to that, straighten the handlebars at a stop, and you'll greatly reduce the odds of dropping your motorcycle at slow speeds. Now, there are a few other things that can contribute to a drop, but this is probably the biggest issue that contributes to drops. Handlebars slightly turned, reaching out, getting a little bit aggressive with that front brake, motorcycle's going over. Again, write this down, repeat after me, or if you're the tattoo type, get it tattooed on your forearm right there. Slow speeds equal rear brake only. Those are words to live by and words that will help keep you upright. So the next thing that you should never do on a motorcycle is to be jerky with the controls. That's the handlebars, that's the clutch, that's the front brake, that's the rear brake. You want to be smooth. And by being jerky, I'm not talking about being rude or a jerk with your motorcycle. Motorcycles have a pretty thick skin and they're rarely offended. I'm talking about a lack of smoothness with the controls. So show me a good rider and I'll show you a rider who is smooth with the brakes and the throttle. They're smooth with their clutch hand and they're smooth with the input to the handlebars. Abrupt or jerky movements cause the motorcycle to get out of balance, either side to side or also front to back if we're not smooth with the controls of the motorcycle, and it becomes an even greater problem to the available traction that the rider's got available to them. You know, a motorcycle tire can handle a very heavy load and not lose traction. Motorcycle tire can stop pretty quickly, and they can lean further into the corners than most of us have the ability or the trust to allow them to do. But what they're not very good at is handling an abrupt or a quick load. Motorcycle tire, as it's meeting the pavement, it deforms so that the rubber bends around the little grooves and places in the pavement, and it kind of locks that motorcycle tire in. That gives it a whole lot of traction when that tire is locked up with the road surface. What they're not very good at is if the tire's here and we give it an abrupt movement, we go to the brakes quickly before weight has had a chance to transfer to the front tire, causing it to lock in. If we're jerky with those controls, we could cause the tire to either slide out or to lock up prior to being able to get a good grip. A good rider who needs to stop quickly applies quick but smooth application of the brakes, especially that front brake. This allows the weight to transfer to the front of the motorcycle, pushing that tire into the pavement, allowing it to lock into the surface of the road and provide an incredible amount of traction. A poor rider grabs that front brake, causing the tire to stop spinning before the weight of the rider and the motorcycle transfer to the front of the motorcycle, and this either causes a crash or, best case scenario, it causes the ABS to activate, which may extend our stopping distance depending on the surfaces of the road. So if you don't practice emergency braking, you're likely to grab the brakes in an emergency and crash or extend your stopping distance. Only with repeated practice can we unlearn that natural, albeit bad, reactions of grabbing the controls and replace it with proper technique. But I can promise you this, if all you've ever done is emergency braking in the MSF class in order to get your license, you'll not have the smoothness when you need it at the controls or the mindset to be smooth and stop quickly when you need it out on the street. That only comes through repetition and practice, and you can only get that by practicing on a parking lot. I give you everything you need to practice those skills at the field guide. So if you watch these videos on a regular basis, consider becoming a member and supporting the channel. For full access to everything that MCrider's got to offer, go to mcrider.com/member and create your membership there. Till next week, guys, it's Kevin with MCrider, and I'll see you on the road.